tap in. Tap, tap, 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 tap in.
Welcome to TT from the D podcast show, Tap In Tuesday. And I want to say, firstly, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from wherever you are in the world, for taking time out of your evening to tune in. I know we have a lot of technical difficulties going on across the globe, especially here in the D. I'm a girl from the D, and so we have power outages and all kind of things. But guess what? This is important. Tonight's hot topic, human trafficking. This is an important segment, and I'm very blessed to have three amazing people that's going to be sharing their experience, their educational journeys, their advice. We're going to discover, and we're going to, um, if I can say, blow the whistle on some myths about human trafficking, but we're going to tap in. And so I don't want to keep people long. I know people has had a long day, but I definitely want you guys to be able to, hey, Crystal, hey. I definitely want you guys to be able to learn some things tonight. My guests this evening are going to be dropping some jewels. I can definitely tell you that every time they come on, they always do that, and it's such a blessing. Let me tell you a little bit about my guests, and then I will bring them into the building because they are ready to go. My very first Gus is like a brother, a big brother, um, a leader, a wonderful father, a dope granddad. He's one of them cool granddads. But he's also our former chief of police for DPD. He's a man about his business. He's also a spiritual leader, right? And so there's so many levels to him. I could go on and on about him. I've had the pleasure of having him on this platform several times. And the gentleman I'm talking about is this gentleman right here, Ralph Godbee. He is one of the guests on the panel tonight. My second guest that I'd like to talk about, this woman is super dope. I actually met her by stalking her on social media. I can say that. I can say that. Not stalking her like in the true sense of the word stalking, but actually followed her from social media, just catching some of the interviews she's done. She's a counselor, she's an author, licensed therapist, trauma expert. The list goes on and on with her as well. And I took a leap of faith, as some people will say in this industry, you shoot your shot. And I reached out to her, and she responded, and I was humbled by that. Had her on my podcast platform several times as well. This is the first time I've been blessed to have her and Ralph on tonight together. That's a lot of dopeness. If you know either one of them or you've seen any of my shows with them, you're talking about wealth of knowledge on top of wealth of knowledge, okay? And the lady I'm speaking of right here, I love this photo of her. She probably will kill me, but it's Dr. Laura Streyffeler, all the way from Fort Myers, Florida. And then my third guest is a wonderful friend. She's a sister friend. We've been friends for over 20 years. She is one of the godmothers to my youngest son, Cody. She is a registered nurse, a trauma unit expert. She actually will be joining us in not too long. Duty calls, right? And she, like I said earlier, there's a lot of things going on with power outages and accidents and things like that. And she's in our top trauma hospital here, I believe. I want to say in Michigan. Ralph probably could tell me if that's accurate, but I know definitely in the area. And that woman that I'm speaking of, her name is Miss Melanie Smile. She's also an author upon other things as well. So, as you see, I have a very dope line of people bringing some information to you that I hope that you will grab a pen, a pencil, a crayon, a marker, use your smartphone, take some notes. And if you tap in late, I want you to go back. I don't want you to miss anything. Tonight, we are going to bring awareness to a very serious topic that's not only a local thing, it's something that's global and it's an issue. And it's time for us to see how we can do something. We talk about it, we sweep it under the rug, or we get other things in our face, but this is something that's happening every single day. And I personally wanted to bring it at this season because we're getting ready to bring the International Auto Show to Michigan. And upon my schooling, I found out that that's one of the biggest times that they do that here in Michigan during the auto show. And I'm thinking, like, what? You'd be surprised. But then again, some of you may not be surprised. So, without any further ado, I'm going to bring my guest in. First up, batters up is going to be the awesome chief, former chief of police, but he's still my chief. I don't care. Respect to the chief. Okay, no shade. Okay, but this is always going to be that one. You know how we say about Obama? Well, some of us say about that's still going to be our president. This still going to be my chief. Okay, so we're going to bring to the stage Ralph Godbee. Ralph, hi.
How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. I feel so humbled by that wonderful introduction. Somebody's probably like, "Who is she talking about?" Didn't think it was me, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Firstly, I want to say thank you because I know that you have a lot on your plate always. That's why I try to reach out in advance and give you a little bit of notice and hope I can get on your calendar. So I want to say thank you. Um,
Oh, it's such an important topic, and
yes,
education and information is huge. So thank you for making this a spotlight because a lot of times there's not enough attention paid to this very traumatic human condition that we find a lot of women and children involved in, and it is one of the sickest crimes that you can think of. So thank you for bringing attention to it.
I appreciate that, my friend. And yeah, I think I feel right that uh, human trafficking. I definitely, but I want to use this. We talk about anything really. I, where we,
TT, I don't know if you can hear me, but your volume is going in and out.
you know what? I'm in a area, and I think I'm gonna,
Okay,
and we're gonna see if that's gonna work.
okay.
Can you hear me better now?
You sound 1,000,000%. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So we're gonna rock with this. Okay, so let me go and grab one of our other guests really quick. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to add to this awesome panel this queen, Dr. Laura Streyffeler, all the way from Fort Myers, Florida, even though I would rather be there right about now with that weather instead of this weather, but yeah. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
How are you?
I am good. I feel blessed to be here too. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Well, I no longer really work as much with victims of human trafficking. I train a lot of providers about a lot of the human service personnel. Florida is in the top four of the human trafficking states. It kind of New York, California, Florida, and Texas are the four big dogs. Well, they not, and that's certainly not something to be proud of, to be in the top four, but it's something that started being recognized, I think, before a lot of the other states, because it's so prevalent here. And in the beginning, people had no idea how prevalent it is. And it's bigger than anyone could have ever imagined throughout the country. And because of how lucrative it is, it's just growing and growing. Chief, I'm sure you've heard, drugs you can sell once, but a person you can sell over and over again. So they're
Yeah.
making much more money with selling human slaves than they are selling drugs.
Doc, I'm glad you used that term slave because that's so appropriate. Because even at times, I think trafficking, that term, does not resonate with people. But when you realize the magnitude of trauma that persons that are trafficked are under, and that they are literally slaves, and it is one of the most reprehensible crimes that can be perpetrated in modern society. So thank you for utilizing that term because I think that really crystallizes it for some people.
It
Uh,
is, it's human slavery.
yes, it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Well, that just gets us right into the meat and potatoes. If we can, for our listeners and viewers from around the globe, because we have a lot of people from everywhere. Um, Godbee, could you tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about you?
So I joined the Detroit Police Department at 19 years old. I was fortunate to ascend through the ranks, and at 42 became its 40th chief of police. And just I've been very blessed, from a career standpoint. But I think the biggest thing that my career has allowed me to do is give me a platform to talk about issues, and very, very issues that have a particular um, onerous effect on communities of color and minority communities and disenfranchised people. A lot of people, people think it's counterintuitive that as a preacher of the gospel, that I'm such a supporter of the LGBTQ community. And I am for a number of different reasons that are personal and spiritual. But what I had seen in my tenure as in law enforcement is that is a very vulnerable community because of some of the social mores and the religious mores that have been placed upon people. A lot of times, these young people at very young ages, they have to fend for themselves because their families have not accepted them or their lifestyle, and under religious reasons or otherwise have put them out. They have to fend for themselves. And there are a lot of very sick individuals that leverage that and take advantage. And you will find transgendered individuals, gay individuals, disproportionately in the sex trafficking or slaves because they're just looking for a safe place to be. And when you have a young person who, number one, is still trying to understand their sexuality, then they've been ostracized by their parents and not given a chance to thrive, that's a level of trauma in and of itself. And then when you add the repeated rape of those individuals because they're not willingly in the sex game, then you have an individual that is severely traumatized. There was a transgendered individual when I was chief of police. Her name was Shelly Hilliard, 19-year-old. And this had such an impact on me personally because of her plight. Shelly was murdered. Her body was dismembered. Parts were thrown at different portions of the city. And it was one of the most heinous crimes that I had witnessed in my 27 years of law enforcement, 35 years total with being an adjunct professor. And it just really how dehumanizing it was and how devastated Shelley's family was. And it was simply because she was a transgendered individual and some very I'm trying to be very nice in how I say this. It's
How about
probably
unspeakable?
unspeakable. People with unspeakable conscience or lack thereof, because they were messed up about their sexuality. Um, just just murdered a beautiful individual. So it gave me a particular sensitivity to that community, and from an advocacy standpoint and understanding the tie of vulnerability and vulnerable populations to sex trafficking. We really have to do a lot of education to families to what they're subjecting their children to when they ostracize them, they put them out over a gender preference, gender choice. Those things, if we don't have a greater level of understanding of how to communicate with our young people, this issue is going to be even more prevalent because, as Dr. Laura said, the financial impetus and how much money is in the sex trafficking game, it is unbelievable. And then the persons that participate, that are very quote unquote um, normal, and I use that in quotes, but they're your corporate heads, and they have husbands and they have wives, and they go home to their pristine neighborhoods, and they utilize and objectify people for their own personal aggrandizement and sexual deviance. So it is such a vicious cycle of what goes on. And then the trauma that's left behind for those that are blessed to be extricated out of the sex trafficking world. There's a world of trauma that has to be mitigated and dealt with by persons such as Dr. Laura.
Well, well, thank you for your service, and thank you for your heart that goes beyond, your level of service behind the badge and wearing the blue. Dr. Laura, could you let our listeners and viewers know a little bit about you as well and how this ties to you as well?
Well, I'm pretty much a healer. I think of myself as a healer first. I grew up, my dad committed suicide when I was a teenager. My mom struggled with mental health issues. I got involved in a abusive relationship in college and married him, and then left when I was 27 with 2 suitcases and $175 and moved to Florida and started my life over. And shortly thereafter, we talk about giving purpose to the pain. I started working in a domestic violence shelter. Now, I'm really old, so we're going back to like 1989, 1990, before, people were talking about domestic violence. Just then on the hotlines, people were starting to see things on television about domestic violence and shelters, but really understanding things. And then I went on and I got my master's, and for that I wrote a program for teenagers arrested for domestic violence and their families, like a pretrial diversion program. And then I did programs in the jails for the inmates on domestic and sexual violence. I did on call to the hospitals for domestic and sexual violence. And then I went back after I had a child and became the clinical director of the domestic violence shelter. And we not only took in victims of domestic and sexual violence, but we also took in victims of human trafficking. And then I continued, and I've taught college, both in criminal justice and violence related courses. But again, I've also done a lot of training with the community, because initially here in Florida, people weren't paying as much attention to human trafficking because they were thinking they were, we'll say, non-American citizens that were being trafficked, right? Illegals. And, that wasn't really thought of as much in the beginning. It was like they were talking about as though they were purposefully illegal coming to the country. They didn't understand they were coming against their will, and they were prisoners of, they call them coyotes, the traffickers. And that it was that everything they did, their passports, if they even had them, were pulled, and they had no ID, and they were isolated. The only place they were allowed to go is to church, and even that was to just, look good, and would call home. But then we started seeing more and more of, I'll say, our own kids. So many of the runaways and the throwaways, and a lot of the coyotes got really smart, and they'd start picking up kids at shopping malls in the food courts, where they'd be sitting, and there would be three kids, and they'd go up to one and go, "Oh, baby, you're so hot. You're so hot. If you were my girl, I would be talking to you. I wouldn't let, them make me the third wheel," and then take them and get their nails done, and, become, their boyfriend, and have sex with them, sometimes give them drugs, sometimes not, and hook them in. And it becomes a very one-way, controlling, dangerous, um, relationship. And a lot of these kids that are trafficked are 8, 9, 10 years old. And, because they get paid more for a virgin. And so they want kids that are young. I know of situations, more than I'd like to talk about, where they try to sew them back up, and, so they make an artificial hymen so they can sell them as a virgin more than once. I mean, you can't make that stuff up. I mean, it's unbelievable the egregious things people come up with to do to these young, vulnerable kids. And it's not just, it's women and children, but it's also young boys. And like the chief said, it's, people in the LGBTQIA community. And it's also a lot of men. You see a lot of the men, you see them sexually trafficked, but you also see a lot of it in the restaurant industry, in the hotel industry, because it's free and cheap labor. They'll work all day, and they literally give them $2.
Wow.
And victims of sex traffic, they have to work with tickets. Or marbles or rocks. They're not allowed to even touch the money because they're so afraid they'll take it. So most of the women, and I'll just say women, but victims that I've worked with, have to have sex 30 times in a day, every day, before they're allowed to. They have to collect 30 tickets, and they can't stop till they have enough tickets that they're released from duty, and they've made the money that they have to make. And no isn't an option. And whatever the John wants to do to them, there's no consent, there's no choice. It's basically survival sex.
Wow. I'm I don't first of all,
But TT, there is a wow factor that and this is the importance of you utilize your platform to expose what sex trafficking is, how violative it is, how dehumanizing it is, and how criminally deviant it is. Because a lot of instances, when it's spoken of, it's not given in the detail that Dr. Laura and I have kind of, the nuance of it. And
right.
it's more than just a missing person. This is a person that has been exploited, and traumatized and sexually raped. Like Doc said, upwards of 30 times a day, and no, it's not an option. Menstruation is not an excuse.
Wow.
Whatever the John wants. And that's the importance of Michigan recently, in the past 4 or 5 years, started to decriminalize a lot of the statutes that dealt with prostitution, because it didn't deal with the pimps, and it didn't deal with the Johns. And the importance of that is you have to recognize the trafficking victim as such, a victim. They are not sex workers. These are not adult
Amen.
people doing it because they choose to, and they're some glamorized escort or something. These are people that are slaved and enslaved, and then it's exacerbated by drugs. So there's so many different things that make it against the the slave's will. And we talk very often about the effects and the deleterious effects of post-traumatic slave syndrome, but we have a very different, very violative, but very active manner of slavery that goes on. And it's not just a U.S. problem. It's not just a top four state problem.
Right.
We're talking about international. So you could very well have a young child that is, pulled into the sex trafficking world in the United States. They could end up in Russia, Ukraine, Japan, Germany. They could end up literally anywhere on this planet, which exacerbates the law enforcement effort. So that's the importance. If you see something that just doesn't seem right, because a big part of it, and I don't want to get into the psychological part because Dr. Laura can do that much better than I, but it's the control. And when you see a person that is extremely fearful, they don't want to engage, they are very timid, and they are kind of retrenched when that dominant figure that is trafficking them in the way. We do have to show a level of courage and old nosy neighbors. And if you see something, say something. There are a number of different sex trafficking national hotlines, but as simple as calling 911. If it does not look right, there's a potential that you are probably witnessing something that could be either a prelude to a person being abducted and pulled into the sex trafficking arena, or they already are. So it's important that if you see something, to say something.
That, I know there was a question I want to address from Richard. I don't know if Richard is still on here, and then I want to bring Melanie. Melanie has stepped in to join us. And as I had said earlier, due to technical difficulties in the storms, I came to another location to record, but I'm going to be moving when it's time to move. And if we're going to use this platform to do what we're supposed to do. So you'll probably see me walking, y'all, going to my car and sitting in there. And we're going to continue this because this is important. But I do want to address this question from Richard Nichols. He said, how can a regular citizen help with human trafficking?
Oh, can I buy a vowel and answer the question? I think, is the biggest way is to be, the first thing is to remember is to be human. A lot of times there's so much judgment because of the things that traffic victims are told and made to do. There's judgment about the behavior. So the first thing is to be human and to be kind. And the other thing, and this is one of my triggers, is to remember, those of us that are helpers and healers and get it and want to help, that doesn't mean that everybody's ready for help. And if you go, and then you go and say, I'm here to help, trust me. Never say to somebody, trust me, because they're not they can't trust the people closest to them. So you're going to have to, sometimes with little kids and they say, don't just grab them, let them come to you. Let somebody just pay attention. Let them know that you're available and that they can come to you. If you go to them, you're going to be perceived as just one more predatory person, because everybody that connects with them either hurts them or wants something from them.
Wow.
And
Chief, you want to chime in there on that one?
To Dr. Laura's points. Also for Richard, if you go to dhs.gov, that's dhs.gov, there are a number of different tools on there to help identify, or some things you can look for, some characteristics you can look for in someone that's being trafficked. Also, there's a 1-866 number, toll-free number that you can report. But the simplest thing you can do, because I'm very cautious in forums now, not to overcomplicate things, is calling 911. Now, if you have any suspicion that there is a sex trafficking victim, and then I have noticed as you travel the interstate now, at various rest stops. They have anonymous reporting information for someone that's being trafficked, or if you witness something that resembles trafficking. So there are tools out there, but I think heightened awareness is what's lacking, because you can have all the tools in the greatest toolbox, but if you don't have any awareness of the magnitude of what this violative crime is and how frequent it is, Michigan is in the top 10.
Yes, we are.
So
Yeah.
we are
Yeah,
not.
we are.
Well, and I want to add, not to be, Debbie Downer, and I've had a lot of really positive experiences with law enforcement, but with human trafficking, not everybody's educated and not everybody's kind.
Yes.
So if you're going to call 911, you don't get the young rookie or somebody that's just coming out. You specifically say, I'm concerned. I believe this person is being trafficked. I need to speak with somebody in the unit that's familiar, and you don't just, make a random call.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for the clarification, Doc. You're right.
Gotcha. Well, let me bring Melanie into the building. Melanie Smiles, who is our registered nurse. She's a trauma unit expert. This is heavy. This is heavier than I already knew it was going to be heavy, but some things you just said, it just, sheesh. All right. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Melanie to the platform as well. Hey, Melanie, how are you?
Good evening. Good evening. It's like the volume is like really, really low. So I wasn't able to hear Chief Ralph Godbee and Dr. Laura from the time I came on that much. I don't know if it's my system or, just some technical difficulties, but I can hear you a little bit. How is everyone this evening?
Well,
Good. Glad to see you.
Nice to see you too, Dr. Laura.
so Melanie, as we chime in, I did let everybody know you leaving the hospital. You still got on your blues over there. So we appreciate you coming straight from there and jumping on here for this serious matter. Could you give our listeners and our viewers a little bit background about who you are, and then we're going to bring you up to speed to where we are right now?
Yes. My name is Melanie Smiles, and I'm a registered nurse in the emergency department at DMC Hospital, Sinai Grace Hospital. I've been there a little bit over 10 years, specialize in trauma, ER, critical care, you name it, that's what I do. So
you do a lot. Yeah, Chief, it's true. Grace is that number one place. Like, people can be all the way 4 hours away. Take me to Grace. It's like they will risk going, because y'all are,
especially when
best.
it's dealing with traumas. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So we were talking about it just got real intense, real fast, real quick. But we were talking about how Ralph and Dr. Laura had got involved, their background, but tied into human trafficking and what they've witnessed, some things. Can you share with us an encounter that you may have had with a human trafficking victim?
Yeah, first, we are educated and trained to identify some of the signs of human trafficking victims, both physical and mental. So I haven't had that many encounters with human traffic victims, but I have had a couple of them. And to my surprise, a lot of them, they were fearful, but they really didn't want to tell on their perpetrator. I believe one of them may have developed what we may call Stockholm syndrome, where they develop a bond or feelings towards their abuser. And they're very young. And when they come in, a lot of them is timid. They're fearful. They don't look well kept. And a lot of times their abuser, if the abuser is there with them, they like to take over. They like to speak for them, hold like paperwork or documentations and things like that. And a lot of them sound like they're coerced, like they have rehearsed, certain lines and told not to say certain things. So you can kind of sense that, and we look out for those signs. And what we try to do is get the person that they're with away from them, so they can feel comfortable and, speak to us. Like Dr. Laura, I did hear Dr. Laura said, first thing we should do is, let them be human, and to be mindful of some of the things and the trauma that they may have went through so they can feel comfortable enough to talk to us and agree to get help. But one of the young ladies that I did speak to when we was able to get her abuser away from her, he didn't go easily though. We actually had to put him out. So she did talk to us, but it was very limited information. She did let us know that she was involved in human trafficking. She told us that she wanted to get help, but shortly after a while, she ended up leaving against medical advice and not letting anyone know that she left. I don't know if she was afraid of us, more the abuser than the police, or, we wasn't able to follow up with that situation. But that was one of the encounters that I did have with one of our human trafficking victims. And a lot of them, they are young. They're young, and they're very withdrawn. So, if you use your the extra sense and your intuition, some things that you definitely can pick up with. So,
And Melanie, if I could add to your point, as far as the reticence for the victim, what the victim is afraid of is that telling someone they don't take them seriously. And if you tell law enforcement nothing happens, and then you go back to the person that is trafficking you, you are subjecting yourself as the person's being trafficked to abuse, violence, sometimes even death. So that's why education is so important. To your point, Dr. Laura, local law enforcement really has to step up their game as to their understanding of sex trafficking, the requisite responses, because it wasn't long ago in my career that domestic violence victims pretty much had the same plight, much more educated about domestic violence. But I don't think we have that same level of education and awareness about sex trafficking. So Melanie, I can see exactly why the person would initially give information, but then, kind of disappear because they have to balance their own physical safety. Because it's one thing to say, call the police, but if the police come and don't do anything, and then that person's left with their abductor, their life is even more of a living hell than it already is.
Well, Chief, I totally agree. And to expand on that point, we'll start with traffic victims that come from other countries. I hate to call it the recruitment process of trafficking victims is very similar to victims of domestic violence, where a lot of the parents turn their children over willingly. And interestingly, for like young women, it's usually a female, and they have her go, and it's somebody who's well known in the community, and she comes back and she has a nice coat on and boots and jewelry, and how nice it is in America, and we're gonna give your kids a better life. And so it's that, the new term love bombing, that everybody's love bombed, and it's bigger than until they get over, and then all of a sudden all the rules change. And a lot of the dynamics are very similar. The like Melanie said, the Stockholm syndrome, because the person that's causing so much pain intermittently is the only person that gives them pleasure, and they're afraid that they love them to death, and if they make a mistake or go against them, that potentially could be the end of their life.
Yes. And Dr. Laura, I'm not the person asking questions, but if you could just take a moment to explain trauma bonding, because a lot of times people don't understand how someone can be traumatized and still bond with someone, or feel a loyalty to someone that has harmed them at such a level.
Well, I think a lot of times the first thing, and I heard you, Chief, I heard you use the word normal. Normal's what you used to. And actually, I had a book come out this morning, and it's on Amazon, and it kind of talks a little bit about this theory. But normal for most people is very different than healthy.
Yes.
And so, it's not like a lot of the kids that are going in or adults grow up in loving homes. So it's really, kind of that love hate is kind of their normal and what they know and what they think love looks like in the beginning. And then they get love bombed and they fall in love with the fantasy thinking it's the person.
Mhm.
And then that person that's giving them that, or they've had that, is the person that's inflicting the pain. So they, it's a chemical back and forth, and it's what they think love looks like, in addition to it's basically that an adrenaline high, and it's you get connected. It's that trauma where you're basically in survival mode with that person. And it's not really about a calm, conscious choice. It's about the trauma itself that keeps you there.
Yes.
And with the Stockholm syndrome, like Melanie was saying, it's more, that people don't understand why they leave, because that's the only place they can ever feel loved or feel love. A trauma bond could be, for an example, two people, that meet, let's say, a law enforcement officer that saves, that's in there and saves somebody during a trauma. That part of that bond is they went through that trauma together. So that bond of the horrificness kind of makes them stuck like Chuck.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow, this is a lot. Yeah, that's a lot to process. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I said bring a pencil or marker, crayon, put your smartphone on, grab these notes. Sanford Brown said the state of Michigan has recently mandated specific groups of healthcare professionals to have training in human trafficking before receiving a license or certification. She says she's advocating with her state congressional leaders to extend the mandate for all mandated reporters. Now, I have to say this. Thank you for sharing that. I know they also are implementing it in school districts. And I did some training on mindfulness, and I'm looking and working towards becoming a mindfulness coach to implement it in a school district, also like in everyday life. But we talked about human trafficking and what that looks like, in little breakout groups and things like that. And I am really feeling, after listening to you guys, it was in the back of my mind, but I really felt that my 12-year-old was approached by someone with those type of tendencies not too long ago during a carnival in our suburban area. And he was with a friend, and this, they were walking under, I don't know what you call this. It's almost like when you go to New York and then they're doing construction and then they have this covering where you can walk. Okay. So they had that on the side of the street where this CVS was, and they left the movie theater, and it's busy, it's crowded, it's daylight, it's early in the day. And he said, you walked one way, and then when you were coming from the other way, you walked a different way. He said, so we were leaving CVS, he said, and we're laughing and talking. And then this guy was actually going towards CVS. He turned around and he said, hey, excuse me. And I said, oh, that's where you went wrong. Like, I ain't got time for you. Like, what? So he said, excuse me. He said, can I get y'all to do me a favor? And he said, we were looking like, like what? He said, I have a friend that owes me some money and he ain't giving me my money. Can I get you guys, can I record you guys saying blah, blah, blah? And I'm going to send it to him so he can get my money. My son said he felt nervous, so he started patting his pockets like, oh, I left my change. He said, come on, man, we got to go back. They didn't give me my change. And he said, we took off and we ran towards CVS, right? He said, we ran into CVS. He said, and we kind of ducked to the side. He said, we saw the guy standing outside the door like he was waiting for us. He said, so we got nervous. And he said, we went towards the back of the store where there's a lot of people and we kind of waited a little bit. And I'm thinking, like, well, did you call your dad? Why you ain't called? What? And he was like, I don't know. He said, but we just kind of waited. He said, we walked back. We didn't see him out there. And we kind of peeked out. We stepped out. We didn't see him. And we crossed the street and we ran back to the theater. I talked to him about this. I said, that could have been someone, first of all, that could have just took you as far as recording you, you're talking, and they're like, oh, yeah, I want this person. I want that person. Or holding you there, engaging you, or someone driving up, because he wasn't just walking doing this. And before you know it, we would have never saw you again. They could have made you get into this vehicle. When you ran into CVS, that was good, but you should have told somebody, hey, there's a guy that approached us. We feel uncomfortable and we don't feel safe. Okay, they could have called the police. I don't care if you was just, hey, you don't approach people's kids like that. So I said, there are things you have to be thinking. You thought wise by saying, hey, I think I left my money and y'all took off. You did great, but you should have went in and alerted an adult and said, hey, there's somebody out there that approached us. I don't feel comfortable. Can you call the police? You should have got on the phone, called your dad, me, someone that's close by. But is that the type of thing that would happen? Do you think? I know we talked about earlier that a lot of times these young people are approached in the mall, in the food courtyards, or in groups. But is that something that could have been a potential person looking to traffic a kid?
Well, even if it wasn't trafficking, there could be unfortunately, a plethora of different reasons why someone that has a deviant mindset would try to abduct a child. And we do have to pay more attention. And there used to be a stranger danger campaign, not to talk to strangers when we were coming up. And I think that, we really have to, with some intentionality, teach our young people about what sex trafficking is, how you're lured into it. Even if it's not the specifics, because it would have to be age appropriate as to what we're talking to the kid about. But we do have to let young people know how to recognize when someone's trying to entice them and pull them away. Because the number of missing and exploited children in this country, it is unfathomable in what's quote unquote one of the greatest democracies and countries on the planet, to have such a profound problem with missing and exploited children. So to that ENTT, I think you did your son should be commended that he had the cognition, to know that whatever they're asking me to do, it does not feel right. But to take it a step further, you're absolutely right. But that goes to education and intentionality. And I have not seen that level of intentionality around those issues relative to teaching our kids of kind of what to recognize and how to recognize those issues.
Thank you. As I said, I know my viewers, listeners might be like, what's she doing over there? Okay, so I'm at a location that is not my home, and I'm getting ready to move and maneuver as we continue this conversation. I think we need to educate our young people. I think, how we have these assemblies and we always talking to kids and we bring in different people. We talk about domestic violence and we talk about all kinds of things. We need to take into the school settings to talk about this, what this looks like. A lot of times you have, and even adults, I have a 20-year-old and I tell him, don't think they don't get older people or, your age group. And they don't it's not always the little kids or you could use another child. I remember another time we were in a Burlington,
Mhm.
and it was late at night, and I had my younger son. He was much younger, and we were walking through, and there was a little girl that was just wandering off from these guys, and I'm thinking like, why is she like this? They ain't even looking, but it seemed like they were moving everywhere we were moving, and I was alone with my son, and so we were looking for something. We had a basket. Well, they didn't have a basket, so they were just like in the same area, which they could have been shopping. But the little girl kept trying to get my son's attention. She would go to the end of the aisle and almost like a peekaboo game.
Mhm.
And at that time, he was one of those like to hide type of kids. And so I'm like, Cody, get your ass over here. And so he was like, the little girl, I said, I don't care about her. You don't know her. So I'm thinking like, and y'all not even looking. You're looking, but you're not looking. And so I told myself, I said, I'm gonna move to the other side of the store. And I took him, I said, okay, come on. So we walked, pushing the cart. We over in the little aisle where you're looking for like furniture and stuff for your home. Here they come. I said, oh no, no, no. So I ended up leaving my basket, taking him, walking, and we left out. But I was thinking like, you hear those stories about how they watch you at Target and Walmart when you're going in late at night, and it's scary, to be an adult is
Mhm.
scary. So I can't fathom how children feel. You have kids that's walking to school every day, taking the bus. They have to go out sometimes and it's dark still outside. They come in, it's still dark. We have to make our children, our young people aware of what that looks like. So that brings me to this question. Godbee, I'm going to pose this to you. What does a human trafficker look like? And I did that. I know.
Yeah, but I think that's an important point because we all have this, a person in a trench coat type of,
Exactly.
some creepy looking person. And I think we do a disservice to the conversation when we generalize like that, and we fall prey to stereotypes or what that person looks like in a movie. That person will be a very handsome, a very charismatic individual because it's a mindset. It's not a particular person. And if I could just share some things that a person will look for, if you're talking about the person that's being trafficked, does a person appear disconnected from family, friends, community organizations, or houses of worship? So if they had a pattern, because patterns are discernible. And one thing we have to pay attention to in people is if their patterns change, if their behaviors change. I can say this unfortunately experientially. I was a straight A student in high school, middle school, elementary school. When I was a sophomore in high school playing football, my high school football coach molested me. My grades dropped precipitously. I started drinking, skipping school, became hypersexual with women. And my parents did not associate any of that with me being violated. All of those drastic changes in behavior. I'm literally, Dr. Laura, a straight A student until the 10th grade of high school. And, so that trauma experience changed me completely. So I warn parents to look for those things because if your child has not been trafficked, they could be being courted, like you said, Dr. Lowe, with the love bomb, because we assume that it's always a child that doesn't have a parent at home. Sometimes you have that parent that is, busting their behind, working 3, 4 jobs. The child is latchkey, and they may be missing that touch with the parent, but that gift from an older person giving them some attention and then enticing them, that could be a prelude for a trafficking type of situation. Has a person had a sudden or dramatic change in behavior? Is a juvenile engaged in commercial sex acts? Is a person disoriented or confused or showing signs of mental or physical abuse? Does a person have bruises in various stages of healing? These are some things you can look for. Um, and this is not all inclusive, but you really do have to trust your intuition just as a human being and looking at someone's human condition to give you some clues as to you might be engaging with someone that's seriously traumatized and potentially being sex trafficked. So the indicators and clues are there. I think to Richard's point earlier, yes, it is much more complex than calling 911. But to some people, that 911 call could be, the impetus for someone finally recognizing them and getting them help. Because in a lot of instances, and Dr. Laura could probably elucidate on this much greater than I, there are a number of different reasons why victims don't report their victimization.
Yeah, they're
I
go ahead. Where'd you go? A number of reasons, love, fear, but the other thing, and I think focusing on the victims and the understanding is critical. But I think it takes a village, and we have to focus on ourselves as helping professionals and as parents, as teachers, and all sorts of people to pay attention and to make it feel safe for people being okay to tell us things.
Yes,
especially our kids, to become a safe place where a kid can come and say, I need to tell you something, because they trust you, because they feel safe and they feel heard. So the greatest barrier to a human trafficker is a human that really creates a safe space to a child, because the longer they're involved in the human trafficking, the more trauma and the less likely they are to want to get out. And when they do, they talk about victims going back to abusive partners. Victims of human trafficking very often go back to the coyotes because that's the only family that they know, and they've been so victimized and traumatized, they don't believe they deserve any better. So we have to really pay attention, and not so much even the prevention, but in the early stages to pay attention and talk about things.
So true. Melanie, can I ask you a question? I know from my experience as chief of Detroit Public Schools, um, educators, different people have mandatory reporting requirements. Are there any mandatory reporting requirements that you would see in your field that could potentially be tied to sex trafficking or human trafficking?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the last thing you said? Are there any
Mandatory reporting requirements that medical professionals are under that could possibly be um, signs of some type of trafficking or that the person is being abused?
Yes. Yes, not only just with trafficking, but any type of abuse. We call it a 3200, where we do have to report to law enforcement any signs, if we identify any signs of abuse, neglect, or anything like that, and also social work, So, yeah, there is a protocol that we do have in place that we do have to contact if we identify that.
And Dr. Laura, I think that's why, in a lot of instances, the coyotes are going to do everything they can to keep the person that they're trafficking and holding as a slave out of a hospital.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of them aren't too old, but, there are a lot that are older than 18 and they just look real young. They don't feed them so their bodies don't develop, and, to keep them looking as young as they can. And sex trafficking and what they call sexual servitude, domestic servitude, which is basically you're a sex slave to one person in a house, and you cook and you clean, and you're just there to do whatever that person wants, and they pay the coyote for that. But in addition to those two, again, you see a lot in hotels and restaurants and nail salons. So it's important to know that it goes beyond the sexual. And just because it's not sexual doesn't mean it's not trafficking and it's not horrible.
Right. And I would also like to say it's not always obvious or easy to identify or spot out someone that we may think is involved in human trafficking. We have had patients to come in with their abuser, and they were interacting like, they were a happy couple, only to find out after they left, we may see them on the news or something like that. And we're like, wow, that was our patient. It's not always obvious signs, but like Chief Godbee mentioned, you do have to use your intuition. And we also have to be mindful that as we increase awareness for human trafficking, they're also going to become more creative in how they bait, their victims and things like that as well. So, it's always good to just keep an eye open and just, use your intuition, and, ask questions if you can, and try to make them feel safe and heard. Like Dr. Laura said, that's very important. That's something that I've learned.
Well, I know it happens in all the neighborhoods. I know here what was happening is they started traveling, to different locations. And, the perception is that it's in the, some low-ranking hotel, but they're going into very fancy gated communities for 6 months at a time and bringing the trafficking victims there. A lot of the clientele, live in communities like that, not, they don't go into their own communities, but the communities don't pay attention because they say, people like us don't do stuff like that, and it doesn't happen in our communities, and law enforcement isn't usually looking there. But there is no us and them when it comes to human trafficking.
Chief Godbee, let me ask you this. So do you find it still true that doing the International Auto Show here in Michigan is one of the biggest times that people come from all around with human trafficking?
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why is because just from a financial standpoint, the just amount of money that you could generate by trafficking in sex when you have an international crowd. You have people that are of means because to travel to the auto show, then not to mention, unfortunately, executives of all levels from major automobile industry and industry insiders. So any type of conference of that nature, regardless of if it's the International Auto Show here in Detroit, they host it in LA, Chicago. Anytime you have that type of clientele, it's what's called a target-rich environment. So they go where the money is. So that's what makes it appealing. It's not necessarily just because it's Detroit, but because of the type of clientele that they would engage. Because that's why it's very important that the Johns are held criminally liable at a very high level, which is not always the case from a prosecutorial standpoint. But the trend is starting to change, where there's more attention paid on to the person buying the sex than the ones that are engaging in the sex industry. Because again, as Dr. Laura said, and I think it's very profound to remember, dope you sell once is used, but a person's body, when you are controlling it, it's reaping a financial dividend, in a negative way for that trafficker several times over. I mean, 30 times in a day, if you start to do the math on that and how quickly that adds up, and the financial just unbelievable. I mean, and this is something that, one of the dirty little secrets that the chambers of commerce won't tell you. Once the dirty money is spent, once they count what the revenues were for the conference, they're just looking at the bottom line of did the conference make money. But a lot of those conferences are stimulated by that type of activity, and there's a circuit that follows those different type of events around. The Super Bowl. I mean, we're talking about the auto show, but the Super Bowl, NBA championship, Major League Baseball championship, NBA All-Star game. All of those types of events and venues are the underbelly. You know, you have the official events and then the underbelly of the unofficial events that are much more devious but still make money. Those are all part and parcel a part of those types of events. I was a part of the Super Bowl. I ran the command post for the Super Bowl when it was in Detroit, and that was a big issue that we had to deal with. It was not only the official NFL events, but it was the unofficial parties and the prostitution and the things that went along with that, which goes directly to sex trafficked individuals.
So that's coming. So the auto show is coming here next month, and this is the first time, with all the remodeling and everything, we're going to do indoor, outdoor. So they're going to use a lot of the waterfront property down there, the River Walk, and so when I was learning about it, how they, they're not going to look like the dirty, thrown away. Some of them are presentable and they have codes and a certain language. It's almost like they have another language too, right?
It's a whole different lexicon. Escort. They use but they use lexicon that is not discernible to be just obviously sex trafficking. But if you follow it to its conclusion, that's exactly what it is. And some of those take much more intricate sting operations to get to a point where you have a provable crime. Because if you just go on the banter, they are very adept at using lexicon that will not get them arrested for the lexicon alone. So there has to be some level of undercover operation to expose some of these rings.
Well, and it's important to know if you travel over state lines, to do this or doing things through. Now there's a lot of the digital stuff too. They force them to do stuff online because you can make buku bucks with that too. If it goes over state lines, now it's a federal offense, and you can also report it to the FBI. The FBI deals with a lot of human trafficking.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have to elaborate on that, Dr. Laura. What do you mean that online? What are you saying?
There are interstate commerce laws. So if I commit a crime proper in the state of Michigan, I'm subject to state charges. It could have a federal nexus. It couldn't. As soon as you engage in some commerce that goes from one state to another, now you're talking about international commerce issue, and then it rises to a federal level because it crosses jurisdictions. And there are very definitive laws about crimes that cross jurisdiction. But the thing about human trafficking, it's not even just interjurisdictional in the states. Particularly in Detroit, we share a border with Canada. And then the northern part of the United States shares a large, expansive international border. We have a border with Mexico. So trafficking is much more deleterious in its effect and its affect than other crimes, because again, it's vulnerable populations. So immigrant populations are targeted. Some of those that are immigrant have been moved here, specifically by coyotes for sex trafficking. So it's so much nuance and detail that it really has to be a very concerted national and local effort that's done in concert. And it can't be done in a vacuum to really have an effect on that industry.
So,
and TT, what I was saying was that the traffickers would have these men and women in rooms making them perform sex acts on each other or other people or with toys or interact with the Johns, where it's basically forced cyber sex, or when I say worse, the things that are done to them against their will, which the coyote is getting paid to watch or somehow be involved in digitally.
Gotcha.
So that's the voyeuristic aspect of it as well. And those crimes are a little bit more difficult and more intricate to track, because sometimes the routing can go through different countries, the IP addresses, they mask the IP addresses. So uh, it is just a horrendous situation that requires a lot more attention than it's given.
Yeah. I you know, I know Melanie is a profound traveler. She travels all over the place. I have to ask you this, Melanie. Um, as much as you've traveled out of the country, do you think in passing that you've s- perhaps may have seen some people that may have been victims of human trafficking? Do you think?
Um, I can't say that I have. Um, no, I don't think I have. Um, I don't think that I have. I can't say that I have. No.
What about
I know
you,
that, and I
Chief?
definitely know that it is out there,
Hmm.
and tourists are very likely to, get they look for tourists, to get baited into that. But I can't say that I have seen that. No.
What about you, Chief?
I I am sure surreptitiously I have, and I think most people have. Uh,
Crystal says she has. Crystal
but
Brown.
I think it really comes to okay, should I mind my business?
Mm.
I step in, and for me, intuitively, as a former police officer, I'm a little bit more bold in stepping into stuff. But intuitively, just most people just kind of want to mind their own business. And if it's just not blatantly obvious to them, I'm sure people have encountered things that they've had in discussions over coffee or went home and talked to their spouse about, that fell into that category. However, not having that level of expertise and knowing what to look for, they just knew something was strange. So I would venture to say that people have probably encountered more than they are aware of, and have probably talked about it in terms that are not clinical, but I'm sure that people have, even if they have not, don't have a level of expertise to know what to look for.
What about you, Dr. Laura?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think separate from my work environment, working with victims, I think likely I may have seen one or two, but again, the dynamics are so similar to domestic violence. It's hard to know. And the one thing, especially with sex trafficking, is these victims are, except to go to church, they're not really allowed to go anywhere. They're not taken anywhere. So being seen out in public is not really an option for many of them. It's not like you're going to run into them when you're going out to dinner or when you're at Walmart, because they're not going to those places.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. That brings me to a question that's kind of off the radar because we got real deep this evening. So, what are some calls? I'm gonna kind of pose this out there. So, you said they're not going to Walmart, they're not going out to dinner, sitting down with us. What are some type of service workers, for instance, the mailman, UPS driver, FedEx, Amazon? What are some things they should be looking for? I saw a video, and unfortunately, due to the technical issue I had, I didn't get to upload it. but there was some type of video that I think I found, Godbee, off of DHS.gov, where they showed some examples of right in your face things that's happening that we don't say, oh my God, maybe I should have called somebody.
You know, or I just, I get so excited when a phone rings and it's not mine. Sorry. You know, I believe, and sometimes I think this is counterintuitive because we all want to report everything and do everything and, you know, put on our capes and save everybody. But one, we want to make sure somebody wants help, because like the chief was saying, you know, earlier, you know, if victims talk to somebody and then there isn't follow through or something happens, they're going to be punished or worse. So before we do what we think is best, you know, the victim knows his or her situation better than anybody. And the one thing that we can give them that the trafficker doesn't give them is a personal choice. You look like you're struggling. Can I call for help? Do you need anything? Here's, you know, that you kind of just let them know that you see them and that you're available, because sometimes we can put them in more danger depending on who we call, if they want to go, if they think they said something to us and they didn't, you know. And that's why sometimes that mandated reporting, which I know we do and I do it a lot, but you know, sometimes it can be a double-edged sword.
Yes.
Especially because let's tell the truth, I'm not very politically correct. You know, you can't always trust the person on the other side of the call, if DC, whether it's DCF. I mean, we're all people with jobs, and some people are more compassionate than others. And if we're going to teach about human trafficking, we have to teach about basic human decency and compassion.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Come to help, you know, what we make the call because we want to help, but the truth is we have to make sure that we know who we're calling, because the people that we're calling to help can escalate the situation exponentially if they don't know what they're doing or they're not compassionate.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. It makes you, it puts you to a place, in my opinion. Of course, this is TT's opinion. If I see something, then I call, I would, and me being transparent, I'd get mad if the victim didn't want to go. And my thing is this, let me ask you this, Chief. So let's say Melanie has a victim that alerts her that this is what's happening, like they did. And once you put eyes, now this is a two-part question. Melanie, once y'all put eyes on, y'all knew this was a victim, Godbee, is once you're notified, is there somebody that's supposed to come down and say, hey, this person can't leave, we got to make sure this person is safe, even if they don't want to go with you and they want to go with it? Is that a choice they get? Do they really get a choice to stay with their kidnapper?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but ostensibly it's still the victim's choice, absent something that is just very egregious that requires an arrest. So, for instance, when I first joined the police department, it was not uncommon, and it's literally happened to me. Got called to a domestic violence run. I mean, as me and my partner pulled up, we witnessed the man assaulting his wife. Ran up, pulled him off. We fell through a glass table. I'm all cut up, and his wife's jumping on me, saying, "Leave him alone." And we literally pulled him off. So I say that to say, fast forward, domestic violence laws change to the extent now the person does not have to or want to prosecute, and we can still make the arrest and can still prosecute.
Right.
Human trafficking has not matriculated to that level of intervention legally. So there is still some choice that's involved. it does need to matriculate to that level of intervention. I just don't think it's there yet. So yes, an adult can decide. Now, if it's a child, it's different. But an adult can decide that yes, regardless of how egregious it looks on the outside, or how I moralize it or look at it legally, they still have a choice in the matter. So that provides some difficulty going to the Stockholm syndrome, as Melanie pointed out, some of the trauma issues that would cause a person to stay, and then just some basic failures in the system where they don't have fail safes to make sure that that information goes forward, that that person can be protected, and that's guaranteed. And if law enforcement say they have that mechanism, they're being disingenuous because they don't.
That's why if you're going to make the call, you have to know you can call chief, you can call this person, that you know people in the system that you trust, and that you're not calling a number.
Right.
You know, so if you want to be that person, it's not that you shouldn't call and, oh, it's going to get worse, but if you're going to do it, you have to do it all the way. You don't just make the call and say, okay, I can sleep tonight, I made the call. You have to say, I know who to call. You have to do some homework, because it's not simple. And, you know, Chief, you were saying, you know, I remember years ago, the number one most dangerous thing for death of a police officer.
Domestic violence one.
28 years old, 10 o'clock at night, at a domestic violence call, and victims would attack the law enforcement officer because they know that they're leaving. And once they leave, they're just left with the abusive partner. Absolutely. And they are afraid. And so this way they can say, see, I tried to protect you, not, you know, you got my ass thrown in jail.
Right. It's 100% correct.
This is mind blowing. And something else that stood out, you guys had kind of mentioned, you said that there's other forms of things that go on besides sexing with human trafficking. You said that there's labor laws being broken. You mentioned, so give some examples to our viewers and listeners of other ways that a person could be human trafficked, but not just for sex activity.
Well, there's sweatshops, you know, because you have minimum wages, which, you know, the minimum wage is abysmal, but there are people that leverage their bottom line. And if they can get free labor, which is the whole premise of slavery. I mean, if you look at the African enslavement in the United States, you have it's free slave labor. So the fight was not only a moral fight for the South, but it was also an economic fight, because it affected their bottom line because they were losing their free labor. So it's the same principle that applies in this instance. So if you're not being utilized for sex, but you're in a garment shop, you know, not making anything, or $1 or $2 per hour, when you're clearly violating federal labor statutes, that is a very real problem in the labor industry. And, you know, so you will see quite a few arrests and industries that have raids or carried out for probable cause because of that type of labor inequity, and it's slavery. It's slave labor.
Yeah. Or what happens is the coyote acts as the broker, so to say, and, you know, basically has these slaves working for him or her, and charges the business, if minimum wage is $10 an hour, charges them $7 an hour, and, you know, and gives the person, you know, 15 cents an hour, right, and keeps all the money, you know, so all the money that they make, they're still being paid the labor wage. It's not quite as lucrative as the sex trafficking, right, but it's done in much bigger volumes.
Right.
I've seen a lot of that happen with immigrants that come over here. And actually, I worked at a country club for 14 years, and I saw that a lot, going to certain people's homes, and you know, they have someone from another country here, and they're not even paying them anything. They feel like they're housing. They feel like since they're here in the United States, living in this house, that's a privilege and that's enough. When I've seen that done many and many of times
And,
with a lot of immigrants.
and the threat of deportation
Mhm.
for them not being appropriately documented is the
Mhm.
thing that's hung over their heads. And depending on the
Mhm.
situation they come out of and how poor the situation was they came out of, that's a powerful tool to hold over someone's head
Mhm.
here in the country illegally. So it goes. I mean, it is just such a depraved situation that I'm glad that Dr. Laura points out it goes beyond the sex trafficking.
Mhm.
Wow. I think Crystal Sanford Brown tapped in to what Melanie was saying. She said that we're seeing a large number of foreigners working as nannies, and the coyotes imitate with them with deportation. Going back to tap into what Dr. Laura said, it's terrible. I have to say that it's terrible. It's heartbreaking. Um, there's so much that we have to be worried about in the world on an everyday basis. And someone said it earlier in the comments that I think it was the gentleman, um, Mr. Nichols, Richard Nichols. He said that, you can call, let me go back to his, I don't want to miss say what he said because it made me think like, wow. He made a comment. Okay. He said, I understand. He was talking about I think he was in agreement with what you had said, Godbee. He said, I understand, and I'm gonna post it right here. He said, I understand, and I see something, say something, but I see it as a bigger problem. He said, Chief, I don't think the law enforcement has control that causes regular citizens to not see anything. We see and we turn our head. Now, I think a lot of times, as we in touched and agreed on, I believe tonight, that we don't know what we may see, and we want to be certain that what we think we see is what we see. But at the same time, it leaves you with I shouldn't say nothing because I might not be right. But when that person leaves your view or you leave out of their sight, you think to yourself like, damn, what if that was? So you're kind of like gambling. I saw myself in Chicago, and we were waiting on some friends to come out of a place, and was looking at, I'm always nosy, so I'm always looking around at my surroundings and things, and I saw this guy coming out of this club with this girl who looked obviously drunk. And there was another girl with her, and he was like, oh yeah, she's okay. She just needs some air. She just needs some air. And I'm looking, so my husband and our friend, they're talking, and I'm in the back seat looking. And so her friend goes back into the club, and the girl could barely stand up. He's out here, and I'm like, if this is his girlfriend or something, he aggressively kissing on her. She had on a short skirt. He's got his hands off. I'm thinking like, so I told my husband and our friend, I said, hey, I don't think this her man. I don't think this her boyfriend. So there's like, she looked like she had a little too much drink. I said, yeah, but would you be doing that, groping? And he picked her up and had her against the little wall right there. I said, now who doing all this out in the public? So I'm looking in the back seat. I'm like, what can I get? And they was like, I mean, the girl came out with her, and she obviously would have just left her out there. But I was like, some people aren't like that. So he led her to the car, and she acted like she didn't want to get in it. And then he picked her up and put her in it, and they pulled off. And I sat there and I was hesitant. I said, what if this man don't know her and he just took her? But then again, what if there's somebody he do know and she just wasted, and I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. But I thought about it as we drove off later. I said, what if that girl was kidnapped and being human trafficked?
Well, it sounds to me like she's more likely, to be sexually, she's going to be violated.
And that haunted me for a minute because I felt bad. I said to myself, you should have got out, whether this was somebody she knew or not. You should have got out and you should have said something, or you should have walked a different way, or I should have had my husband and our friend get involved. But then again, what if I was wrong? So what do people do like that?
Next time you could just say, well, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. You're not accusing anybody of anything. You just kind of check in. You guys seem like you've had a lot to drink. You sure you can drive? You don't go, and just have a conversation. So just just checking. Just about that. Again, just being human, just checking, making sure everybody's good here.
Yes, ma'am. And I think societally, I think that's something we lost, the ability to empathize and to just to see the human condition and ask if someone's okay, and not feel like you're being violative when you do that. So I like the way you frame that, Doc, because I think a lot of times we are worried about kind of sticking our nose where it doesn't belong, when you're simply just, worried about somebody's human condition. And we should be able to express that. So I think that's a very profound point.
Yeah. And there's a lot of work we all do, Melanie being in the medical field, Godbee, you see it from different perspectives, from the legal point, but also I want to say it could be happening in our churches where we go and praise and worship.
I would not doubt that it does. That's one of the places that sex traffickers will allow their victims to go. So I am probably more than confident that we have encountered persons that have been trafficked and abused. And, again, but that goes to training, education, and just talking about things. Because the more you make people aware, because I think we oversell police response to everything, because police respond to crime for the most part. Statistically, I don't care how politicians try to sell it, response time has absolutely nothing to do with reduction in crime. Because the reality is, by the time you call 911, you call the police, the crime has already happened. So it's not a preventative tool. It's a response, and it's a reactive tool. So educating our spiritual leaders, educating our ministers, our teachers, our police officers when they do encounter our medical professionals, so we can intervene at the appropriate times when we see signs. I think that that's where the intentionality has to be, and then a greater emphasis on mental health helps, because it is still as even though it's getting better, it's still very stigmatized. Because if you had a parent that was more inclined to talk to a Dr. Laura, if they don't understand their child's gender preference or gender choice, as opposed to just shutting them out and putting them out. So now you send a vulnerable person into potentially a sex trafficking situation, or you're calling the police in to try and fix it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So there just has to be much more intentionality on how we deal with vulnerable populations, and more acceptance, and dealing with it from a more psychological standpoint, as far as understanding trauma responses, and understanding, mental health, because the individual that's LGBTQ, that's not a mental health issue. It's the parent that can't accept their child for who their child is, and that would ostracize their child and hate their child, for what their child feels that their gender preference is. to me, that's where the psychological part comes in. Learning just how to love in spite of and not because of. And then that way your child is, or that young person, that vulnerable person is not more susceptible to being sucked into that lifestyle because they have no other place to go. And there's not acceptance and understanding in the places that they go, and safety.
Well, and the amount of trans kids. I was on a LGBTQ panel. I was the ally. I joke. I say I was telling everybody I was the A. I didn't realize the A was asexual. See, it pays to know stuff.
Yes.
I was doing training. I go, wasn't my husband surprised? He came home and said, guess what? I'm the A. But for a lot of the guardian ad litems and the things, because trans kids, I mean, both gay and lesbian kids, but trans kids in huge numbers are being thrown out of their homes.
Yes.
Parents are throwing them out, and just, they're either being abusive to them or just throwing them out because of they're talking about wanting to transition.
Yes.
Crystal just broke it down for us with all the letters. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and more.
Yep. Oh, wow.
And there is also one with a 2, which is from the Native American community for 2 wins. Which is
two wins?
Wins? That was new for me.
I know. What's that mean? 2 wins.
It's 2 wins. I don't know if it's a form of bisexual or if it's kind of trans from one to the other. The person that told me about it didn't seem to know, but was saying that the Native American community, wanted to be included, so they have a 2. They incorporate a 2 in there for 2 wins.
But I have to say, I know we've gotten away. I've kidnapped you guys way over the hour. I apologize. I had said earlier when I was talking about, okay, we're gonna, I'm gonna have to leave the library, but it's such a powerful topic. Human trafficking is something that I wanted to shed light on. We need to be more aware. I feel y'all know we didn't even get to really tap in the way it was structured, but I believe when there's divine order, it just manifests and you don't stop it. You just let it do what it does. I'm very convinced in my spirit that someone somewhere heard something that's going to help change their lives. Not only that, but I feel like not only I was more educated, and I'm the host of the show, right? But people who may never really understood about human trafficking. Like there's different levels. I was aware that there's different levels. Like it's not all about just sexing, but just the things you guys said earlier, Melanie, before you came on, they said some stuff that shook my spirit. And I have to pose this question. They had, I think Dr. Laura started it and Godbee finished it, but they were talking about how unfortunately, some of the victims are very young, and they get more money for virgins, right? And so where they'll sew them back up to make to make it look like the hymen hasn't been broken, correct?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I don't know exactly what they do, but they can do it. Like I've heard up to 3 times they do, and then to kind of create some kind of also, so they'll think that they're virgins.
Melanie, if you ever had a child come through your trauma unit with something like that, you would immediately call the police, protective services, because that would be not normal for a little child, right?
Right. We actually had a situation that occurred last week with a 7-year-old little girl that we suspected was, possibly penetrated or something. And we definitely had to notify um, the proper people. We did a 3200. So yeah, we do have to notify them that. And that was a very sad situation last week. Yeah.
In that case, with her being a minor, was she allowed to leave with the people that brought her?
Um, at that time, after the law enforcement and everyone was notified and everything was documented, um, it was out of our hands actually after she was examined and medically cleared and things like that. So uh, she was free to go with the mother per the police. They did come.
Wow.
hmm
See, that's heartbreaking. It's almost like
Because
you.
supposedly the mother actually brought her in because of that. So it was a close family member in the home. So um, that was suspected of that.
Wow. You probably would have got a 911 call on a different level, right? A crime that's been committed. Now you gonna spark another crime because I can only fathom in my mind, right? You're not gonna go home and talk it out, right? Wow.
And TT, just to give additional context, we're talking about just the United States of America, where some of these things are in place. There are some countries that, number one, a woman's rights are just not acknowledged at all, and women are still treated as property. So this can, be so much more intense once it goes outside the United States. Even with the laws that we have in place here, there are just entire cultures that are misogynistic and still treat women as property and children. So this, it goes far deeper than just what happens in the United States.
Yeah. Melanie Crystal Sanford Brown said, "Thank you for not second guessing and submitting the 3200." Yeah. Yeah. Um, I definitely want to do a part two, y'all. It's just a lot. I hope that time in your calendars, because all three of y'all are super busy doing a whole lot. And then the work you do, it doesn't stop just because clocks stop, and I'm aware of that. But I'm hoping the next segment we get to do, if you'll be a panelist again, that I'll be able to bring on Sergeant Young from Southfield Police Department, who is on that task force that directly deals with human trafficking. It was interesting talking with her and talking with her partner doing our back to school fair, and I told them, I said, I'm gonna have Godbee on and Dr. Laura and Melanie. I was telling them, a little bit about you guys, and so we were talking, and then of course a crime was trying to manifest itself while I was in the midst of talking to her. I had to let her go. I'm like, okay, you got to go. I get that. Like, that's more important what I'm talking about. But it's just, it's mind blowing. I feel like we could talk about this for hours upon hours. I feel like there's people that have a lot of questions. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put it out there for people to, put the questions that they feel like they wish I would have asked this evening. Questions they may have that if we haven't touched on it, that I'll bring on. But in closing, and I hate to close it because it's just so much more that I wanted to address, but for the sake of me not stealing any more time and y'all killing me in the spirit, for the sake of closing, what advice from a medical standpoint would you give, Melanie, to a victim that could be watching that needs some medical attention, that if she or him, because it goes both ways, was to go into not necessarily your facility, but any medical facility, what could they say to someone there that would spark something in that medical professional person's mind that says, hey, they're in trouble. We need to make a call. They need some help, but they can't necessarily say it. What is something that they could say to you that would spark you to make a call?
I would ask direct questions, and gather as much information that I could, and try to listen for the things that they don't say. And if their abuser or perpetrator is there with them, most important thing we could do is remove them from out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because a lot of times they won't say anything while the perpetrator is there, but once we get them out of the room, talk to them. Make them feel safe and also heard. And at the end of the day, they do have a choice, and there is help available. So that's one of the things that I would do, is get the other person out of the room and try to talk to them, make them feel safe and comfortable to talk, and ask them if they want help. Because you'd be surprised at how many of them say that they don't want help, unfortunately.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Laura, so you're in the business of helping people, and if Melanie, it's almost like I got the perfect form right here. If they go in and they saw Melanie, and Melanie would notify Ralph, and then being safe in that zone, he could contact you and say, hey, that's almost like this would be the perfect, how we said we got to know who to call, who we can trust. I really feel like this right here is a safe panel.
We also, I'm sorry not to cut you off, but we also have to be, get out of our own feelings about the situation. Just because we want to help them, at the end of the day, they sometimes don't just think of themselves. A lot of them have family. And I have heard some people say, I have kids at home. They might hurt my kids. They know where my mom lives. So just because, we can't be so quick to call, the police, or, tell on them, because some of them have, family and other people that they're trying to protect, and not just themselves either.
And that's absolutely amen. And that's the only control they have. And if we take that away, we're not doing them any favors. We're doing our conscience a favor, because we can think we did something. But Melanie is 427% correct.
Right. Wow. But it's almost like you trapped.
And at the end of the day, it's not our life. We can be available and offer help, but we can't force it. Just like you can't stop an alcoholic or an addict from using until they're ready. People have to be in control of their own choices. And when they're trafficked, they're not in control. But if they don't want help because they think the help will cause more harm, that's the only control they have. And for us to vomit what we think is the right thing on their lives, and they're not ready for it, or they don't want it, we have to learn to respect that.
Yes, absolutely.
Or we're just re-victimizing them in the interest of being a good person.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
If I can say this, I know that this is an overwhelming subject, and it just tugs at the heart. Even, to a point where you kind of want to throw your hands up. But I try to look at it differently from this standpoint. The more people we educate, the more people we, show resources. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Can we fix it all tonight? Absolutely not. But if one person is saved out of this conversation. If one person has a greater cognition of what to look for, if one person, understands that there are resources out there, then I think this has been a tremendous worthwhile effort. So I could hear and feel in you. This is my, from a spirituality standpoint, this is heavy in your spirit, but you should really just be proud of your platform and yourself for bringing attention to a very serious issue that could help save somebody's life.
I receive that, brother. I do. I'm grateful to have three amazing guests. You guys are repeat offenders because you come back and back time and time, and I'm so grateful for you. But I always try to think when I do get a serious bone in my body, but I'm serious. Y'all know I'm serious. But when I really feel something tugging in my spirit, my pastor said, well, if it's burdening you, if it's a burden to you, it's a problem, you need to deal with it. You need to handle it. You need to do your part. So I knew that, for us, and like I said, it's not just a local thing. It's not just a Detroit thing. It's a global problem. However, I was inspired because I know the car show is coming next month. That's what sparked this flame. But I'm grateful because I couldn't do the show without you guys. Your expertise, you all bring a lot of wealth of knowledge tonight to this platform, and the people. I know for the engagement. First of all, I want to say thank you on behalf of the viewers, the ones we engage with, and the ones that we don't see that's on other social media platforms looking in. Thank you for sharing your information. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your openness and your ability to really blow the cover off some of the myths, um, and just being available, being present in the moment. Not. I know that you guys. And I do apologize for holding you this long, but it's just so much. You know. And I want, I hear what y'all saying, and I'm gonna have to pray because I know how I am. And I'm gonna be honest. If I saw, I don't feel like I would give somebody an option, and I got to pray on that because I don't also want to endanger anyone. I don't want to be the reason someone loses their life because I was trying to
That's
do
when you
what they
trust your
didn't
gut.
want.
You
Yeah.
trust your gut. When do you ask God, or whoever, and you feel it in your gut, and whatever you get will be the right thing because it's coming from the right place.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for giving up your Tuesday evening to share and just be open to the people to give these jewels that you dropped tonight because I really feel like, once this populates, I'm going to reshare it on different platforms and in different groups. I feel like it's going to help make a difference. I'm going to also, if I can, if it be the Lord's will, if I can do it, I'm going to try to take the audio from this show tonight and put it over on my Spotify and Anchor because I have a lot of, listeners that a lot of them are overseas. And so it's always, if we could go after that one, I think I had that conversation with you before, Chief
Yeah.
and Melanie. I know on the spiritual level, we talked about that one, we don't know who that one is. We may think we know, but we don't know necessarily who it is. So for that person that's listening tonight, if this helped you, if this helped you think differently about yourself, about your situation, I can only hope and pray that you know that there is help there. Um, I know I didn't prep and say this to you guys, but do you guys know off the top of your head any, I know you mentioned earlier, Chief, about dhs.gov, but is there any phone numbers or any websites besides that you guys can throw out in closing?
So the number for federal intervention from a law enforcement standpoint of sex trafficking human trafficking, I shouldn't just narrow it to sex trafficking, is 1-866-347-2423. It's 1-866-347-2423. And it's under the Blue campaign. And they also have a card, that's a small cutout card that you can carry, and it will give you just some tips and things to look for that might clue you to your being witnessing a trafficking situation.
And
All
TT, can
right.
I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
If you don't know whether, helping maybe, because I really don't know how many people are going to have access and be in a situation to have to jump in and do something, but do something. Well, I'm kind of seeing something like human trafficking awareness signs at the car show.
Yes.
And put it in people's faces.
Mhm.
People's behavior changes just because they know somebody's watching,
Yes.
Mhm.
even if nothing happens. So I'm seeing these like 11 by 14 signs, human trafficking, and just those being there
Yes.
is like putting a camera. People see them and they feel like there are eyes watching. People are paying attention. You know what? That'll do more than anything.
Yes, it will.
That's right, Dr. Laura. We at our hospital we have human trafficking signs posted even in our bathrooms and hallways. That's one of them right there, and in some patient care areas. It's also a national human trafficking resource hotline number on there that's different from the one Chief Godbee given, and that one is 1-888-373-7888. There's also a website also, that you can go to, www.ice.gov/tips, which is TIPS. So.
Oh, I need to get that. I need to. Melanie, if you don't mind, can you text me that info so once I post this hot link, I could put that out there to share. I'm gonna also drop the flyer that you shared that you guys have posted throughout the hospital. And I think that's a great idea, Dr. Laura, to have, we can go down there, post those signs, hand out those
Big
flyers.
letters, not like a lot of words, just big, huge letters. Human trafficking, a phone, and just kind of a little phrase at the bottom. People are going to be busy. They're not going to stand there and read the sign, but just the big words.
Yes.
Yeah. Awareness is all about awareness,
Yes,
shedding the light.
You put the words in their face and they can't not see it. And then if you want special messages, then you go in the bathrooms and you put signs in the restroom behind the door.
Yep,
Yeah.
we have them in the bathroom. Mm-hmm.
I've seen them in restaurants, and the ladies' stalls, and I'm thinking like, wow, like, but I figure you got to go to the bathroom. Now that's another time the human trafficker, he gonna let you go if you go to the restroom, and I don't know if they have phones or whatever, but I would like to see something even in the restrooms if they could say, hey, if you could, I don't know, like there's so many ideas I have, like I don't know, but
I'm seeing, that may be a good thing to get the school system, maybe middle schoolers, because most of the kids are middle school and young. Middle school is when they really target the kids, and do an awareness campaign, but have them make the signs so they're getting involved and they're being proactive. So it's not just standing up there lecturing to them, telling them, but they're making the posters. They love that crafty stuff, kind of doing the stuff, maybe making a video, doing some homework, making a little TikTok, or whatever, an anti-human trafficking TikTok or post, whatever.
Yeah, I like that too. Last comment I'm gonna read, and then we're out of here. Crystal Sanford Brown said, or there's a large number of women who assist in trafficking. I saw that, and that pissed me off. I can't believe that, I couldn't believe that.
Especially in the recruitment process.
Yes.
Sickening.
Because what happens is the bottom girl, there's like a main girl sometimes the female's the head, but even when the male is the head coyote or a couple, there's an alpha female there as well, and
Wow.
almost in most situations.
Oh yeah, we gonna unpack that the next session. I can't even take it. That blew my mind right there. Like, wait,
Yeah.
Oh
but
yeah,
okay.
she's like the OG.
Yeah.
Oh wow. See now, see you were taking you were taking somewhere. You're taking somewhere else. Okay. Well, I love y'all. I appreciate y'all.
Thank
I,
you for creating this
uh,
platform.
Great job, TT.
Thank you so
thank you.
much.
No, great job to y'all too. I received that, but I couldn't have done it without you. So y'all rest well. Thank you for the education, the love, and I will see you all soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. See
All
you
right.
later.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Take care.
You
Be
take
safe.
care. I will. You guys too. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to conclude our evening, our show tonight. I know it was a long segment, and I didn't anticipate it. I thought maybe I'll go over a little bit of over the hour, especially when light up we had the power outage, and that we are out here. I had to go to another location, and then I had technical difficulties. But you know what? I knew that it was important for us to get this message, and so I prayed on it. I was nervous, but I prayed on it. And I said, Lord, make a way, you know. And he did just that. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for everyone who shared questions and comments and positive energy and vibes. I ask you to share the content. It's not about my show. It's about the content. We are tired of seeing our young people, our teenagers, our fully grown people missing and treated the way they're being treated in this ring. Like it's a pandemic in its own, if I could say that. It's unhealthy. It's heartbreaking. The things that you've learned tonight, the education that you've received, you would be selfish not to share it with someone or organization or group to shed more light. I thank you, Crystal Sanford Brown, for all of you what you shared. As a matter of fact, I love for you to shoot me an email with your info. I think I'd like to bring you on because when we do our next segment, and I know we don't know each other, so you could think about it, you could pray on it. And but you have a lot of information too. And I love the fact that you're working with our government trying to implement. See, we need people like you that's gonna take it to the hill. Okay. That's gonna take it to those places to be heard. So my email, Crystal, is ttfromthed@gmail.com. I really would love for you to shoot me an email if and pray on it. Think about it. If you would be interested in potentially joining our panel the next time we do segment 2, talking about human trafficking from your perspective, joining on with the other guests. But ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to use this platform that God allowed me to manifest and create. People have asked me in the last couple of weeks, what do you talk about on your podcast show? And I'm always saying everything. We tap into everything. And I mean that. I mean that. We talk about everything. Domestic violence month, cancer. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I tapped in last year, but I'm gonna go harder this year. Um, I want to be that person that helps shed light on things. We have a lot that we could talk about that happens every day, but it's not about that. It's about what we don't talk about every day because it happens every day. Just because this show is getting ready to end doesn't mean that human trafficking is going to sleep and pause and stop. It's not. If nothing else, it's going to get deeper, spread wider. That's not what we want, but it's what's happening. And as my guest said, if we shed light on situations and circumstances and we put it in your face, you tend to say, hey, let me put eyes on that. Oh, I recognize that. Oh, I heard that. that don't look right, that don't feel right. And we put the information out there, the contact information, the websites, the phone numbers. If we partner up with people like former Chief Ralph Godbee, RN specialist Melanie Smiles, Dr. Laura, if we know we can reach into different organizations and we can get someone we can trust, they can be an ally. And we can form a Voltron and we can help make that difference that we say we want to see. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys for tapping in. Tuesday was a heavy show tonight. A very heavy show tonight. Very long, but I think it was worth it. No, I take that back. I retract that. I know it was worth it. Might not have been worth it to some, but for the people that I can see that's still here, you saw purpose in it. And I thank you. So you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. I've taken up a lot of your time. I'm gonna go out here and tap into this darkness because we still out here. DTE, where you at? Where you at? Holy Father, activate with the light. But all be well and let yourself be well. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. One brick at a time, y'all. One brick at a time.